Hello, BookThinkHers family. Today's book review is going to come from Know My Name by Chanel Miller. For those of you who haven't heard of it, this is Chanel Miller's raw and beautifully written account of her life before, during, and after her sexual assault by Brock Turner on Stanford's campus. I recently read what author Glennon Doyle had to say about this book, and it really sums up my feelings on it as well. I wrote it down. I think it's so great. She said, "I opened Know My Name with the intention to bear witness to the story of a survivor. Instead, I found myself falling into the hands of one of the great writers and thinkers of our time. Chanel Miller is a philosopher, a cultural critic, a deep observer, a writer's writer. I could not put this phenomenal book down." Trust me when I say how accurate her statement is. There is so much for all of us to learn from Miller's story. She manages to convert her ongoing experience with sexual assault into literature, and this book, as well as her story as a whole, has already had a massive impact on the lives of so many people, men and women alike. Her story is a painstaking unraveling and an intertwining of her two selves, her two halves, her two identities. On the one, there's Chanel Miller, the 22-year-old Palo Alto native with a fantastic relationship with her family and friends, a blossoming new relationship with a boyfriend. She's standing at the precipice of her life and her career. And then on the other side, there's Emily Doe, the sexual assault victim. She initially works hard to keep these two halves of herself separate. Chanel's life and days are very ordinary, and Emily's life is very narrow and confined. Any person who's suffered a trauma, in particular, any woman who has survived an assault or a sexual assault, can understand this type of coping mechanism. You keep a strong face to the world for family and friends, but you bury the struggle and the shame and torture locked inside. You're unable to reconcile the two parts of the self. And we see the many ways that the assault itself, the trial, the media coverage attempt to turn her into a faceless, one-dimensional person. And we get to watch in awe as Miller begins to reclaim her identity and her story, giving it a name, a face, and a voice. We see the intimate details of her pain and also her joy, her growth and also her setbacks, her anger and also her acceptance, and her ability to combine these two halves of her greater whole. Before she wrote this book, this was a high-profile trial where she was known to the world as Emily Doe. After her assailant's disappointing sentencing, her victim impact statement that she actually read at that sentencing was posted on BuzzFeed, where it went viral and was viewed by 11 million people within 4 days. It was translated globally, it was read on the floor of Congress, it eventually inspired changes in California law, as well as the recall of the judge in the case. Thousands wrote to her saying that she had given them the courage to share their own experiences of assault for the first time. I actually listened to her book on audio, and while I'm so used to authors reading their own work with passion, I have never heard someone read like Chanel. It pulled me so much deeper and so much closer to her. I smiled and I laughed and I cried, and I learned so much. I learned so much about the value of speaking truth and what the reality of healing really looks like. Her book has an incredible amount to teach us about humanity, about holding on to anger and hostility. She explains, and this is paraphrased, but that it takes nothing to be hostile, that being the one throwing coals means nothing when she's water, that the coals extinguish when they reach her, that they're just black stones sinking to the bottom. We learn that with grief comes confidence, and with anger comes purpose. And fighting against that would be minimizing the incredible tools her experience has given her. And perhaps the most important lesson that I learned from her book is that victims do not have to exist in society to be an inspiring story. And if the best that they can do is just tell us that they're still here, regardless of what state they're currently in, that should be enough. One of my favorite quotes reads, and I love how she reaches her audience that comes to see her looking for hope and guidance with this, but she says, "You have to hold out to see how your life unfolds, because it will most likely be beyond what you can imagine. It is not a question if you will survive this, but what beautiful things await you when you do." So, if you have not read this yet, I highly suggest and I highly recommend that you pick it up. I think that there are things we all need to learn from her story, and I promise you it will have a profound and massive impact on your life. It will give you a huge dose of perspective. So let me know what you think in the comments below if you've read it, if you haven't read it, or if you want to send me a DM to keep it a little bit more personal. I want Miller's story to inspire us all to speak our truths, and I hope you enjoyed this review, and let's talk really soon. All right, bye everyone.